Welcome to the Power Platform Show. Today's guest is from Microsoft. It's amazing chat we had around the growth of the Power Platform. Sit back, grab your coffee, beer, whatever it is, and take a listen with me. Today's guest is from Seattle, Washington, of course, in the United States. He works for Microsoft as the product lead for Microsoft Power Apps. He's a maker at heart. You can find him on Twitter at RC_says. Welcome to the show, Ryan Cunningham.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's great to be here.
It's awesome that you're here and to have this conversation, because I think there's growing momentum in the community around, when organizations want to really commit to the Power Platform as their platform of choice. But before we go there, just give us a quick update around family, food, and fun in a COVID world.
The three Fs.
Yeah, the three Fs.
So I've got
note. I didn't add a fourth F.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a whole different
PG, right?
That's a whole different podcast. This is a family-friendly podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I've got two little ones.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a 7-year-old who is in the second grade here in the U.S., and I have a 4-year-old who's in preschool. And so, gosh, the last 18 months have been an adventure. I think everybody's had an adventure of some kind, and parents especially, I feel for them. Mm-hmm. But man, we've been through every different iteration of configuration, including hosting a little COVID kid pod here at our house that for several months had run rampant with many children under the age of 7, which was honestly awesome to have kids around during the day and be able to hang out with them, but sometimes a little bit crazy and off the wall. But yeah, now kids are kind of getting back into school cautiously. We're kind of trying to navigate that whole thing that heavily impacts I guess what's the other end? Food and fun. I guess. So lots of we do our best to still keep the food front interesting, but man, sometimes logistics went out. But we've been doing a lot of Apple related things recently. We have an apple tree that has just borne a insane amount of fruit this year. So we've been desperately trying to keep up with it. We baked a whole bunch of pies this weekend. So anybody in the Seattle area, come on over and we'll have some socially distanced apple pie.
I just planted my first apple tree, so
okay.
So I've got to wait for the apples to come.
Yeah, you're a few years out from that, but soon you too will experience the joys of the fall.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, no, most fun around here these days is keeping up with the kids and trying to get outside as much as we can, and we're doing all right.
Nice. Yeah. I was gonna just a bit out of left field. When you look at across your teams and stuff, and in the COVID world environment we've been in, and where I am in New Zealand, we've just been thrown into a serious lockdown again, which is lockdown is very serious here. It means you don't move type thing. And so how mental health, not just for you, but your teams and stuff, kind of what are you doing to kind of make sure that, the folks that report to you and stuff, are healthy from a mental point of view? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something we take real seriously. We have this mantra for Microsoft managers that is, model, coach, and care. And it starts first and foremost with, as a manager, modeling your own vulnerability, and your own imperfection, gosh, even just this morning, I was on a call presenting to a huge chunk of the internal team, and between kid distractions and a contractor deciding to show up at that moment with a jackhammer, just being a real human in the world and not trying to be too perfect all the time is sometimes what it starts with, and then particularly trying to make sure that people are taking time when they need it, being able to step away and have a listening ear, whether that's from a manager or a friend, is important. And we've tried to do our best to create kind of virtual communities within the team and space for those types of interactions. It is real hard when you're not in the same place physically to kind of get people together socially. And gosh, we've tried every iteration from one-on-one virtual coffee chats. We actually use a power app to match people up internally, all the way up to sort of small group happy hours and large group events. But, there are people on this team that joined the team post-COVID and have never met any of their coworkers. It's just a totally different world.
Yeah. I'm 3 months into a new job working for IBM, and I find the same thing. I've never met my coworkers. And I look at things, it's going to probably be 6 months before I do. So it's interesting times.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure soon enough you'll have met all the people at IBM.
Only 340,000 of them.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Congrats on the new role, by the way.
Thank you. And of course, Power Platform's top of mind for me. So I suppose before we jump in, tell us about the growth that you're seeing, which is really around adoption of the Power Platform.
Yeah, it is a crazy growth curve, and continues to be a growth curve. Power Apps monthly active users looks like a proverbial hockey stick, and I think particularly has accelerated over the last 18 plus months of everybody having to very quickly rethink how they work in a digital world, and do it without the luxury of time or really the luxury of expertise in what and by that I mean not just software expertise, but actually there have not been a lot of preconceived notions of how we do a lot of these things digitally, and so being able to kind of invent it on the fly and iterate through it with a shorter inner loop of software development has been really crucial to not just the public health response, but really every organization's response to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it is encouraging to see that under that type of a pressure test, the platform has really held up to its promise for a lot of people, and we've seen just an incredible amount of growth through that curve.
Yeah. So I've been talking to Alan Chai at Schlumberger, and they got something like 20,000 apps in in use, 30,000 flows, under Power Automate. And they've obviously chosen, I think they've got 70, 80,000 employees worldwide. They've really committed to this. And I'm hearing more and more stories of where organizations are going, you know what, we've got so many workloads that we need to address using this type of model. And how do we go about addressing it? Using the Power Platform. What are you seeing around moving away from companies doing an app to doing apps at scale?
It is definitely a trend, and scale means a lot of different things to different people. There is the number of developers, the number of apps, also the scale of individual apps. How many people are able to use a single Power App and the sophistication of those apps. I would say we're seeing expansion on all of those dimensions. Schlumberger is was maybe an early leader in that pattern for sure, and Alan himself, a very I would say ahead of his time advocate of really upskilling the entire organization. That is a pattern we are seeing repeating itself across sectors, geographic regions, industries at scale, and I think. Gosh, a lot of it is a realization that business as usual is not going to get us to where we need to be. The volume of processes in an organization that are not truly digital, maybe they are spreadsheets and emails and other types of passive sort of communication, but they're not really backed by a database, addressable with intelligence, securable at scale. The volume of things that need to change and evolve is way broader than what the sort of quote unquote traditional methods of build or buy allow for. And fundamentally at some level this is about changing the economics of how innovation works inside of a company, and sort of changing who participates as much as what they do.
Do you see that there's a tipping point at which organizations are going from 2 or 3 apps, couple of flows, to going, what is that ingredient? Is it you get an evangelist inside the company? Is it that the CEO spots it and says this is what we're committing to? Kind of, are you seeing any kind of patterns of behavior that takes the one app story or one, a bit of Power Automate, a bit of, RPA inside an account to multiple teams working on them, really the whole fusion coming together of resources and almost a business DevOps process just ongoing of backlogs and apps and excitement?
Yeah. So I would say there are...
Yeah, still here.
So with me. Oh, sorry, I got a little blip on my machine. Glad we're there. I would say there's a couple of patterns, and sometimes they're not mutually exclusive in an organization. There is definitely the top-down pattern you mentioned. A leader within IT or some similar organization realizes the direction that trends are going and says we need to really figure out our low-code strategy, and we need to particularly figure out our innovation strategy and we want low code to be a part of it. Let's go upskill the organization, found a center of excellence, get proactive out there. I would say the other pattern is very bottom up. Individuals discover these tools as part of their Microsoft 365 subscription. They start building things. There are customers who have amassed 5, 10, sometimes 20,000 monthly active users inside the organization of Power Apps before they really embraced it centrally and said, "Hey, we got to do something about this." And gosh, even then, sometimes the response initially is defensive. As a lot of folks who have lived through various generations of low code of the past. There are legitimate questions about how do we govern it, how do we organize it, how do we mitigate data loss, how do we mitigate repeat work. But I think a lot of people, even when they initially approach low code from that lens, as they start working with the tools, realize there's a lot of value here as well. And if we can go take hundreds of people who we did not hire as software developers and find ways for them to be productive, solving their own problems, we create a massive amount of value inside of the organization. And at the same time, if we can take the people we did hire to be software developers and help them become force multipliers with that population, give that population the ability to make better things, do it faster, and solve the hard parts that they may not be able to solve themselves. Now we're getting a higher ROI on the technical staff that we do have as well. And so there's that kind of compounding value that often will meet in the middle. In some organizations, those two things have grown independently. We've shared some public case studies about T-Mobile. At T-Mobile, have a massive community internally of Power Apps and Power Automate developers. Many of them sort of organically grown out of the SharePoint community and other M365 user communities, and also have certain flagship applications built by dedicated professional teams in the organization. And those two efforts, in many ways, sort of independently matured and then eventually converged into a community of practice. So I would say all three of those routes are possible: top down, bottom up, and sort of both at the same time. But we're certainly seeing many organizations become more conscious, one way or the other, about what their strategy for low code is and what their transformation plan is around it.
So good. In line with what we've just discussed, what are the stories that you're telling at the moment? Because stories inspire people, right?
That's true.
The art of the possible.
Yeah.
And you've told a few great stories over the time I've known you, which really kind of open people's eyes to the vision of the art of the possible. Are there any fresh ones that are kind of top of mind for you at the moment?
Oh, sure. Gosh, you know me. I love a good story, especially when it involves Power Platform. We have a lot of them. We are sort of blessed with really good examples of what people can do in the platform. A couple that are sort of public today, but maybe a little newer on the scene that I've been telling as recently as this morning. There's this dealer, a heavy equipment dealer here, a regional dealer in the U.S. called Western States Caterpillar. They sort of rent, sell, and service really large construction equipment across the Western United States. And that team has a fusion team, a central IT-backed team of professionals in BI and software development who have really activated themselves on Power Platform and embraced this idea of collaborating really closely with business people and citizen developers to the point where they've been known to do their software development coding on the retail floor of the equipment dealership, with the users side by side who are going to use the app, changing it in real time, getting real time feedback about how, moving a screen, moving a button increases productivity or doesn't. Gosh, to me, that as a software person for a long time, that type of real time feedback is so compelling, because traditionally we have treated users as research subjects, at a great distance. We go through great lengths to, study them as if they were wild animals, describe all this stuff about them, and then come up with something that we think will be a better mousetrap. But I think just being able to work side by side with users in real time and not show a mock-up but show the real app evolving is just so compelling from an efficiency perspective. And it's an extra cool thing that the people doing that implementation, have a background with Azure resources, with professional code, and because of that can just do so much with the tools. It's a different kind of efficiency than purely just building something faster in the coding part. It's really the process part getting faster, and that's pretty darn cool.
I like it. The Power Platform, what is it? It's 4 to 5 years old now. And, I've been doing business applications since 2003 when I started, right, with back in CE. And I remember being asked at the time, probably my first year in, because I built a company around it, and being asked, like, why are you committing to just this one little area of Microsoft or just Microsoft? Like, do you see a future? And here I am, a long time later going, best decision I made. I have people quite often ask me today, should I pivot my career? Should I get into, building Power Apps and things? Like, is there much runway ahead? Yeah. How do you answer, is there much runway ahead?
Gosh, there's so much runway ahead, Mark. I mean, I said earlier, the growth curve of Power Apps by all counts, both usage and revenue, for premium capabilities is a hockey stick. It is a exponentially escalating curve. But the total addressable market for what this can be is massive. And if you go examine, not just the information worker populations of every company on the planet, but really, anybody with some kind of technology in their pocket, whether that's a smartphone or a HoloLens or whatever it is, and a job, that user population is massive. It's bigger than anything that even Microsoft 365 serves today.
Yeah.
And every single one of those employees at some point needs a piece of software from their company. And so, we are really building this, in fact, most of what I spend time on with my engineering team is building for a 10x scale of what we are right now. And that I think is a modest slice of what we could be, just given the math of what it takes to serve a market like this.
Yeah. It's exciting time. So there's, definitely so much opportunity in this space. When you think about design thinking, and we're seeing it associated very closely with what we do in this space, often I'm asked, how do you spot an area of a business that this technology would lend itself to? And so I would, in the past I've said, listen, if there's anybody, using a clipboard in the business, right? They've got paper-based forms. Hey, there's an app for that, right? We can build something for that. Or if you're using critical confidential data in an Excel spreadsheet, hey, we should, we should put some security governance and do that same type of thing at scale. I was surprised. I was talking with somebody working for the largest, I won't give too much more detail. Let's say a large airline company. And they said, do you know what the most common thing all the teams are running with is Access databases? And I'm like, wow, no way, you know? And so what are you seeing? Like, if you were to describe what are the common workloads that people, whether it be a timesheeting app that's back-ended by SAP, whether it be a request for leave, any of these type of, what are some common use cases that you're saying, look for these in the account, and you'll uncover opportunity?
Yeah, 100%. It is definitely the right question, and one with a lot of good answers. Although at some level, the use cases that are truly repeatable across every company on the planet usually already have a piece of software for them. As a platform person, gosh, if there is something off the shelf that solves your problem and it's built by a team of developers who maintain it all the time, gosh, go use that.
Yeah.
However, there are categories of problems that tend to be common across customers, but always very different based on the industry you're in. And those are the opportunities that are really ripe for app development, because to your point, almost by nature, those very long tail scenarios, as in there's a lot of low volume scenarios, or there's a lot of niche scenarios, are the ones that have been most underserved by traditional software development. There hasn't been enough of a market for an ISV to really nail it across a wide enough population, or there hasn't been, enough of a business case to go do a traditional software development process internally. And yet the aggregate of all those processes add up to a lot of missed opportunity. And so, there's certainly the, I would say, truly digitizing something that had duct tape there before. And there's a lot of duct tape in the enterprise, whether that is duct tape in the form of Access or InfoPath or Excel, and not to at all look down on those tools. I mean, people have been using Microsoft software of those three varieties and many others to get around what they don't have from their business software for decades. And actually, there's a lot of skills built up there. It's definitely not accidental that we have based the PowerFX coding language on Excel, for example, as opposed to something else.
Yeah.
But what wasn't available before that is available now is to take those skills and put them on a much more scalable and relational and addressable and secure platform, which not only has efficiency benefits for the people doing that business process, taking it out of a spreadsheet, putting it on a phone, or putting it in the cloud, has some immediate benefit right away for the immediate users. But now all that data is addressable in a way that it wasn't before. I can much more easily do business intelligence on top of it, do automation on top of it. And so you get those compounding efficiency loops that just didn't exist when it was purely rows and columns in a silo. And so there's that category for sure. And there are certainly use case categories within that realm. Things that are very common are inspection style scenarios, which are happen in almost every organization, but are always very different. What it takes to inspect a restroom at Heathrow Airport is very different from the app it takes to inspect a piece of heavy equipment at Western States Cat when it comes back from the rental shop. But they all involve a human walking into a place with a phone or a tablet and taking some amount of data from the physical world around them and putting it into a system and then taking action downstream of that. So that's an example of one very common use case. The other place where we see a lot of room for Power Platform is the synthesis cases.
Okay.
An extreme example of this is our friends at Ecolab. Ecolab, massive global organization. They do all kinds of water systems, water quality management, et cetera, for organizations around the world. Which means their mobile workforce is sort of a mix of a field technician, a scientist, and a seller, sort of all in one. And gosh, they had more than a dozen individual software tools that each person out there in the field had to use and know how to use and know how to find. Not all of which worked on a phone, none of which communicated with each other. Everything from where am I supposed to drive today to give me data about this customer I'm visiting to let me look up a replacement part, to let me get a guide for how to do this particular procedure. All of those things in disconnected systems.
Yeah.
Being able to bring Power Apps over the top of a workplace like that, and without having to abandon or replatform every single one of those underlying services, create that single pane of glass and do it very iteratively. The first version of that app was, little more than a set of hyperlinks with a landing page, but over time really started to incorporate all the functionality of those underlying systems. Gosh, an app like that can be massive for the productivity of the user population. In fact, even at Ecolab, it has not only made workers more productive, it's actually improved employee retention because the tools are better. And that's a story we're starting to hear more and more often.
Wow, so good. I mean, for me, what you've just said is being well worth having this conversation because
fair enough.
I hope to 10x that what we've just talked about in the world. Tell me about Azure and how it's playing more. Like from an architecture perspective, I understand, where everything sits, but how is it playing more of an active role in the use, let's say in the use of the Power Platform? So we cover all the workloads. Yeah. How are you seeing it, much more playing a prime time role? And I suppose people's skill sets are merging out into Azure a lot more as part of their Power Platform skill set.
Yeah, you definitely see that starting in both directions. You see people who come to Power Platform, build skills, and then start to realize, oh man, I could write my own API and I could host it in API. And they sort of continue that skill journey. You also see people going the other way. You see the developers that are used to Visual Studio, have assets in Azure, realize that maybe this low code thing is for me. After all, a lot of people from the outside may initially have the opposite reaction. I don't need low code. I know how to write code. But in fact, all we've been doing as software professionals for the last several decades is just using better tools and spending less time rebuilding things from scratch and more time sort of combining pre-built assets that are best in class for the problem they're solving. And when you start to look at Power Apps through that lens, it's just another set of tools in the existing toolkit. And you have a lot of developers embracing that. In fact, it's not a fact we publicize, but more than 20% of people who are actively building Power Apps self-identify as a professional developer when you survey them. And that trend, I think, will continue to grow. I think specific to your question around Azure, we're certainly seeing people with existing workloads, be that in SQL or other parts of Azure, bring them into Power Platform, continuing to see a lot of growth in that category. Also seeing a lot of growth in custom APIs managed and hosted in APIM and connected to Power Platform. And also on the more ops side, seeing people continue to take advantage of things like the DevOps pipelines for ALM in their processes for developing on the platform. So all of those are vectors of growth and really contribute to that sort of Fusion team productivity.
Yeah, and totally agree. My last question, which is a multi-part question before we do some wrap-up quickfire, is from your view of things, what's the opportunity or what's the go-do now for, and here's the multi-part, for people to become app makers, for companies wanting to scale with apps, and for general digital transformation?
Yeah, so for individuals out there who have tinkered maybe or sort of looked at low code from the outside but have not really jumped in, gosh, if you're curious, the best thing to do is get hands-on and try. And start to find an app in a day session that you can take them yourself, self-guided, or you can work with any number of partners around the world to schedule a session for your group. It's just a great early entree to what all these concepts are and what they can do for you. And we've actually versioned that into many different categories. There's admin in a day, there's more advanced maker in a day, those types of things. And I think those are good sort of early 101s. Beyond that, sort of bring a problem to the platform. Find one of those things, one of those Excel spreadsheets, and we all have them. The ones that are so complicated they need kind of a user guide, or there's only 3 people that are allowed to edit it, or as soon as somebody starts putting instructions into their sheet, that's a good indicator that maybe this would be better served as an app. Just block out a piece of time and sort of see how far you can get, and a lot of people learn a lot through that process. Now, there are great resources for learning and upskilling, and we are continuing to invest in those all the time. There's courses at Microsoft Learn. In fact, the Power Apps and Power Automate courses are some of the most popular content on Microsoft Learn. There are certification courses beyond that where you can get credentialed as a Power Platform developer. We're actually now working with some universities around the world to implement university curriculum that students can take on low code. So it's certainly not just a self-guided, hope for the best type of thing. We're investing a lot in the experience of being a learner, but at some level, nothing beats getting in there and giving it a go. For the second part of your question, for organizations, this is really about trying to figure out what is your organizational strategy for low code. I think a lot of people look at this from the outside as a technology question, but there is also a human question and sort of a people structure question. What group will be responsible for monitoring low code, setting up policies, and encouraging its use? And how will that group be set up for success? And more importantly, who will they serve? How will they, help individuals within business units and departments become successful on the platform? How will they foster what analysts are now calling a community of practice? Not just a center of excellence of people, in an IT department or similar responsible for implementing policies, but how do we actually build up an internal community of practitioners from business units to help each other? We're starting to see that take off at a number of organizations. You mentioned the great work Alan is doing at Schlumberger earlier. That model has certainly replicated itself in many other places as well. But a lot of times those aspects are not obvious from the perspective of somebody just looking at a tech evaluation for one project or a response to an organic citizen development movement. And I think those are the really important conversations that a lot of organizations should be having now, if not already.
Yeah, I like it. It's been good talking to you. I always like to wrap up with some quick fire, which of course random. Before we do that, is there anyone you recommend from your team or that's got a good story to tell at the moment around the Power Platform?
Gosh, a lot of folks on my team have good stories to tell right now. I would say I am happy to connect you with several.
Awesome.
There's some really cool stuff we're doing, and we have been kind of working out loud on this around collaboration for makers. We're about to launch commenting in maker experiences, followed by co-authoring. So there's some good conversations to have there on how that experience is evolving. We're also starting to bring more of those experiences to end users as well. And one of the big trends that I think we should all look out for over the next years is how we make the experience of using a business application become more of a multiplayer experience.
I love it.
And we've been on this road for a while. We've done a lot of work to put Power Apps and automate in teams, but there's more to come on that front. So we can queue up some good conversations for you like that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, here's your quickfire randoms.
All right.
If you could build your dream home, what random room or feature would you put in there?
Well, guys, now my answer is very different than pre-COVID, but I would put a much better home office in than the one I have right now.
Totally. Totally. So in that vein, if you could only eat one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would be on your menu?
I've been really enjoying, and this is nerdy, the meatless burger revolution.
Are you serious?
I'm a Beyond Burger. I mean, I'm not even a vegetarian, Mark, but I for both the climate benefits and the technology has come a very long way. So I will say, I'll throw you a curveball there.
No, that is interesting.
I don't know that I could do one every day for the rest of my life. I don't know I could do any meal any day for the rest of my life, but that's what popped to mind.
Nice. Last one. If you could do anything in the next year, as in no COVID restrictions, no nothing, what would that be?
I would travel again for sure. I've been cooped up in the Northwest is a lovely place.
Yeah.
But I really miss getting out and about. So I would definitely get back out and about.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Likewise, Mark. Thanks for the good questions and thanks for all the good work you're doing in the community.
Hey, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed that session with Ryan. I'm your host, Business Application MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If there's a Microsoft guest you'd like to see on the show, please message me via LinkedIn. If you want to support the show, please go to buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 Guy. Thanks, and see you again soon.